Now, the hardest thing to remember when everything is swirling around you and when it seems very chaotic and when it seems that you're without a compass, the hardest thing to remember is that today's headlines and history's judgment are rarely the same. Now, I used to say this to the press, and they never liked it very much, but of course, it is true that it is not the urgent today, but rather the important of tomorrow that you have to be focused on if you're going to have a favorable judgment in history. Now, to keep myself in this frame of mind, I kept 4 portraits of Secretaries of State near me. I kept Thomas Jefferson. All right, well, everybody kept Thomas Jefferson. He was the first Secretary of State. He was a founding father, slightly overrated founding father from my point of view. I'm rather an Alexander Hamilton type, but that's another lecture. Secondly, I kept George Marshall, undoubtedly the greatest Secretary of State of all time, the man who single-handedly kept 2 million Europeans from starving through the Marshall Plan and who ushered the United States into post-war leadership. But I also kept Dean Acheson, because you see, when Dean Acheson left office, the question on everybody's mind was, who lost China? And now, Dean Acheson is remembered instead as the founding father of NATO and the foundational institutions that led ultimately to victory in the Cold War. And I kept William Seward. Now, why would I keep William Seward? Well, of course, he bought Alaska. And if you think congressional hearings are rough now, you should have heard his congressional hearings when he came back. How could you spend $7 million to the Tsar of Russia for that icebox? In fact, it was called Seward's Icebox and Seward's Folly. Now, a number of years ago, I was with the then Defense Minister of Russia, a man named Sergei Ivanov, and he said, "Oh, Condi," he said, "you know, I was just in Alaska." He said, "It is so beautiful. It reminds me of Russia." I said, "Sergei, it used to be Russia." We're all very glad that Seward bought Alaska. And so today's headlines and history's judgment are rarely the same.